I want a divorce.
Come in first. You're getting the floor wet.
Did you hear what I said?
I heard you the first time, Doyun. Then why are you acting like I just told you dinner's ready?
What do you want me to do, scream?
Would that make it easy? Is it Seoul?
I understood Korean by then. I had understood it for over a year. I just let your family believe otherwise.
The apartment door had opened at 11:47 on a Tuesday night, and Kang Doyun had walked in dripping without removing his shoes, which told Katherine everything she needed to know about how he had rehearsed this moment in his head. He had imagined it as something he would do to her. He had not imagined her being ready for it. She had been ready for 4 months. The ceramic bowl went onto the counter because her hands needed somewhere to go, and she had long since learned that the most powerful thing she could do when Doyun expected her to collapse was simply not collapse. She folded the dish towel over the oven handle. She looked at him the way you look at whether you check the forecast for that morning. He sank into the armchair across from her after the Korean reveal landed between them like a stone dropped into still water. The confession he had walked in with felt smaller now than the one she had just handed him. "It is not about Soyun," he said, though even he could hear how unconvincing it sounded. "It is about everything. My mother, the company, the way my father looks at me like I ruined the Kang name by marrying a black woman." She finished it without flinching. "You can say it. I have heard it in every language your family speaks, including the ones they think I do not understand. That is not what I meant. It is exactly what you meant. You just do not like hearing it out loud because saying it out loud means admitting you let them win." Rain against the window. 31 floors below, Seoul kept moving, indifferent to the marriage dissolving in a penthouse it would never know existed. "I stopped being angry 4 months ago," Katherine said. "When you started coming home smelling like her perfume and thought I would not notice. I had already been grieving this for months, Doyun. You are only just arriving at the funeral." He flinched. "You knew?" "Of course I knew. I just decided I was not going to fight for a place I was never fully welcomed into. I have some pride left, not much, but some." He had built himself an entire argument for this moment. Reasons, defenses, a wall of justifications to hide behind. Her calm dismantled every single one in under 10 minutes. What stood in its place was something he had not let himself feel in a very long time. Shame. "I do not actually want a divorce," he said quietly. "I said it because I thought if I said it first, it would hurt less than if you eventually left me for someone who actually chose you back. That is the most honest thing you have said to me in a year." She did not move toward the door he was hoping she would walk back through. "But it does not change anything. You did not come here tonight to save this marriage. You came here to be forgiven for ending it. Those are not the same thing. So what happens now?" She stood and looked out at the city that had never quite let her belong to it. Not the boardrooms that hired her for her portfolio and quietly excluded her from client dinners. Not the mother-in-law who complimented her English at every family gathering as if it were a party trick. Not the husband who loved her in private and apologized for her in public. "Now I go back to Lagos, not because you are divorcing me, because I am choosing myself before you get the chance to choose someone else in front of me. I have a design firm waiting for a partner. I have a mother who has been asking when I am coming home for 3 years. I put a life on hold to become Mrs. Kang, and I would like it back." Just like that? Just like that. He did not cry, though he came close. What he felt instead was the particular grief of realizing too late that the person you underestimated had already outgrown you. "I am sorry," he said. And for once, he meant it. She nodded. Not in forgiveness, in acknowledgement. "I know. But sorry does not undo 3 years of making myself smaller for people who were never going to make room for me anyway." She picked up her phone, already scrolling to the moving company she had quietly contacted 2 weeks earlier. "Take care of yourself, Doyun." He left before she did. No argument, no scene in the elevator. Just a man walking out of a marriage he had ended with 4 rehearsed words into a life that suddenly felt heavier than the one he thought he wanted. Katherine stood at the window long after the door clicked shut, watching the rain slow over the city lights. What she felt was something unfamiliar and almost frightening in its lightness. Relief. She called her mother the morning after Doyun left, before she had let herself cry, sitting on the kitchen floor with her back against the cabinets, phone in hand. "He asked for a divorce," Katherine said when her mother picked up, surprised by how steady her own voice sounded. Her mother didn't gasp. She was quiet for a moment and then said simply, "How do you feel?" Not "are you all right?" Not "what happened?" "How do you feel?" A question that assumed Katherine's feelings were the relevant information. "Relieved," Katherine admitted, "which frightens me a little. I think I should be devastated." "Grief doesn't always arrive on schedule," her mother said. "Sometimes it already happened, quietly, long before the official news catches up to it. You have been grieving that marriage for a long time, Katherine. I have heard it in your voice for 2 years, even when you were still insisting everything was fine. You never said anything. You were not ready to hear it. Come home if you want to or don't. Either way, you don't have to decide today." Katherine didn't decide that day. It would be another 6 months before she understood that coming home didn't have to mean Lagos, that somewhere in the process of building a studio out of raw concrete and stubbornness, Seoul had quietly become a place she had chosen for herself, rather than one she had simply been placed in. 4 years earlier, Katherine had met Doyun hiding from a networking event in the back room of a gallery in Itaewon. She was 28, 3 years into a design career in Lagos that was going nowhere fast. In Seoul, on a fellowship she had nearly turned down twice. He stood beside a sculpture no one else in the room seemed to understand, turning a glass of wine he wasn't drinking. When she asked what he thought it meant, he said without hesitation, "I think the artist was angry at his father and didn't know how to say so directly." She laughed, really laughed, because it was the first honest thing anyone had said to her all evening. He didn't ask where she was from the way everyone else had. He asked what she was working on and listened, remembered details she had mentioned only once, and by the end of the night she had forgotten she was supposed to be networking at all. "You're going to think I'm strange," he said, walking her to the taxi stand. "But I don't want this to be the only time I talk to you. That's the second honest thing you've said tonight. You already used your first one on the sculpture." He laughed, unguarded. Nothing like the careful, managed version of himself she would come to know in the years after. It was easy that summer. He learned to cook her mother's jollof badly and with great enthusiasm, burning the pot twice before she banned him from the stove. She learned enough Korean to argue with taxi drivers, though she let him believe for a long time that her understanding stopped there. A small private joke at first. Something that curdled slowly over years into something closer to armor. The proposal came on a rooftop he had brought her to under the pretense of a canceled client dinner. He knelt and said, "My grandmother offered me her ring for this, and I said no." That's a strange thing to lead with. "I wanted this to be only about us. Not the family. Not the name. Not what anyone expects the ring to look like at a shareholders' dinner." He held up a ring that was entirely his own choice, entirely his own money, a small rebellion she wouldn't fully understand the size of until years later. "I know what I'm asking you to marry into. I don't know yet how to protect you from all of it. I just know I don't want to do any of it without you." She said yes before he had finished the sentence. It would take her 3 years to understand that courage in Doyun had a limit, and that she had used up most of it that one night on the roof without either of them realizing it. 3 months into married life, at a family dinner meant to formally welcome her, Mrs. Kang corrected Katherine's chopstick grip in front of the entire table. Then she turned to Doyun and said in Korean, assuming his wife's silence meant she couldn't follow, "At least she's teachable." Katherine smiled through it, thanked her mother-in-law for the correction in careful, polished Korean of her own, and watched the older woman's face rearrange itself into something between surprise and quiet insult. As if Katherine understanding the language at all was an act of trespass. She waited under the table for Doyun's hand to find hers. It didn't come. He was already reaching for his water glass, already changing the subject to something safer, the way he would learn to do 100 more times before either of them called it a pattern. She never told him what his mother had said that night. She told herself she was protecting him from a fight he hadn't asked for. It would take her another 2 years to understand she had actually been protecting herself from watching him choose comfort over her in a room small enough that his silence couldn't be mistaken for anything else. In the early years, there was real tenderness, and she wanted to remember that honestly. Mornings he made her coffee before she woke, the ratio memorized without being asked. A night he cried at an old Fela Kuti record she had played for him, because he said it made him understand for the first time some fraction of what she had given up to be there. That version of him grew rarer every year, squeezed smaller by boardrooms and dinners, and a mother who treated Catherine's every success as a wound to the family's image. She didn't hate that man. She thought she still loved him a little in the specific, harmless way you love someone who no longer exists. What she had stopped loving, long before the word divorce, was the man he had let himself become in his family's shadow. 6 months after the rain, Catherine signed a 2-year lease on 400 square feet of raw concrete in Seoul that smelled like sawdust and possibility. Peter and Yoon's studio wasn't real yet. It existed as a name stenciled on glass, a registration number, and a bank account with far less in it than her mother in Lagos believed. But it was hers, entirely hers. And that felt like something she had not felt in 3 years. Her lawyer Ji-hoon slid a folder across the table at their settlement meeting with the mild exasperation of a man watching a client leave money on the table out of principle. You could have taken the full settlement, more than generous. You would never have to work again. I don't want to never work again. Catherine stirred sugar into coffee she didn't actually like sweet, a habit left over from 3 years of sweetening it for a husband who did. I want them to watch me build something they cannot buy back. Ji-hoon closed the folder. Divorces are usually about revenge. Yours is about spite disguised as ambition. Same thing, she said, just better dressed. The studio's first client was a boutique hotel in Hongdae that wanted its lobby to feel like coming home but expensive. Catherine translated the ache into rust-colored leather, brass salvage from a shuttered textile mill in Daegu, and a mural by a Nigerian-Korean artist she found at 2 in the morning, scrolling her phone instead of crying. The mural became the thing people photographed. The hotel became the thing people talked about. And Catherine Peter no longer misses. Kang, a name she had shed the way you shed a coat that never fit right in the shoulders, became slowly a name whispered in rooms she used to be excluded from. It was not fast. There were months she ate ramyeon standing at her counter because delivery felt like an expense she could not justify. In the studio's 4th month, a client's payment fell through, and Catherine sat on the concrete floor doing the math on her remaining runway 3 times, hoping the number might change on the 3rd attempt. It didn't. She called Esther that night, one of the few friends from Seoul's small Nigerian community she had let herself stay close to. "Come eat something," Esther said. "You haven't eaten today. I can hear it in your voice." Catherine went and sat in a cramped apartment eating jollof that tasted almost right, listening to Yoruba and Igbo tangled with Korean slang, laughing at nothing in particular for the first time in a week. Esther didn't ask once about Doyun that night, which Catherine understood without being told as its own quiet form of kindness. She hired Minjun the next morning on a salary she couldn't quite afford, because some decisions are investments in the person you are becoming rather than the one counting coins at 2 in the morning. By the studio's 10th month, Peter and Yoon had outgrown its first small reputation. A gallery owner in Samcheong-dong hired Catherine on the strength of the Hongdae Hotel alone. Minjun brought her the first favorable review, printed and taped to her studio door like a prize. "You're not going to read it," he said, watching her walk past it toward the coffee machine. "I read the invoices," she said. "The reviews are for other people to decide what I mean. The invoices are for me to decide whether I'm still standing." But she paused at the door on her way out that evening and let herself read it once, quickly, before pretending she hadn't. It was around then that she stopped flinching at the word divorced when new clients asked casually about her name. Peter, not Kang. She started answering with the ease of someone who had stopped treating her own history as something to apologize for. She and Doyun crossed paths once in the lobby of a building she was pitching for. He looked thinner, tired in a way expensive suits couldn't disguise. Catherine. He said her name like he wasn't sure he still had the right to. Doyun. She adjusted her portfolio bag. "How are you?" "Fine. You look well." "I am." She wasn't performing it. That was the strangest part. "I heard about So-yoon. It didn't work out." Catherine felt nothing sharp about it. No triumph. Just the mild sympathy you would offer a stranger. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Are you?" "No," she admitted without cruelty. "But I don't wish you unhappiness either. I just don't think about you enough anymore to wish you much of anything." He absorbed that like a verdict he had already suspected was coming. She let a small smile touch her mouth. Take care of yourself. She didn't look back to see his expression. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she wasn't performing calm for anyone. It had stopped being armor. It had become quietly just who she was. Then an email arrived from a name she didn't recognize, requesting a pitch meeting for a building she would have been laughed out of a room for mentioning a year earlier. The Hana Group. 12 floors in Gangnam. A rooftop restaurant. A lobby that needed to say in marble and light, "We are the future of this industry." It was the biggest contract Peter and Yoon's studio had ever pursued. Katherine rehearsed her presentation until the words stopped feeling like words at all. She didn't expect the man at the head of the boardroom table to be the reason her calm faltered, however slightly, for the first time in months. Kim Taemin had turned down 3 previous firms, each with bigger names and bigger budgets than hers. He sat with his arms crossed through the first 10 minutes, expression unreadable, and Katherine found herself doing something she hadn't done in front of a client in a very long time, fighting for the room. If you are still here, you already know this story is not about a divorce. It is about what a woman builds when she finally stops waiting for permission. Subscribe to Afro-Korean Folktales because what happens in that boardroom changes everything. You keep using the word authentic, Taemin said, interrupting her mid-sentence. Not unkindly, but directly, in a way that reminded her of nothing she had known in her marriage. Doyun had never interrupted her in meetings. He had never needed to. He simply hadn't been present in them. What does that actually mean in materials, in cost? Katherine looked at him across the boardroom table. It means I won't put brass in your lobby because brass photographs well, she said. It means every material should earn its place the way every person in your company had to earn theirs. It means I design spaces that feel true, not expensive for the sake of looking expensive. She held his gaze. I think you already know the difference. Otherwise, you wouldn't have turned down 3 firms who gave you exactly what you asked for instead of what you actually needed. The room went quiet. Somewhere behind her, Minjun held his breath. Taemin uncrossed his arms. You're the first person in 6 meetings who has disagreed with me instead of trying to sell me something. I don't sell things I don't believe in. Character flaw. Ask my accountant. Something that might have been the beginning of a smile crossed his face before he put it away. Professional again. Send revised numbers by Friday. I want to see what earning its place actually costs. She got the contract 3 weeks later. The single largest win of her career. Taemin didn't pursue her after that, which was, she would later realize, the entire reason it worked. He showed up to site visits early. He remembered that she took her coffee black now, no sugar, a change she hadn't consciously decided to make, but had somewhere in the months of rebuilding. He never commented on her accent, never introduced her with the faint apologetic undertone she had spent 3 years learning to detect in Doyun's voice. One evening, Minjun looked up from his desk and said, "You're staring at your phone like it insulted your mother." It's from Taemin. About the restaurant materials. Sure, work messages don't usually make people smile like that. But sure, she threw a fabric swatch at him. He caught it laughing and left her alone with the message glowing on her screen. Dinner tomorrow. Not a work thing if you don't want it to be. Your choice. She typed back after a long moment. Not a work thing. 7. The restaurant wasn't the kind of place Doyun would have picked. No maitre d' who recognized a family name. Just plastic stools and a grill built into the table. This isn't what I expected, she admitted. What did you expect? Somewhere that photographs well. He looked up from the grill. I'm not interested in things that only photograph well. On their 3rd date, on a rooftop bar he had chosen because it was too loud for either of them to fall back on small talk, he turned his glass slowly on the table and said, "What are you afraid of?" She hadn't expected the question. Something in her chest went still before it went soft. Becoming small again, she said. I spent 3 years shrinking myself into the shape someone else's family could tolerate. I got good at it. Frighteningly good. I am afraid of being good at it again without noticing. The way I didn't notice the first time until there was almost nothing left of me to notice with. Taemin didn't rush to reassure her. He sat with what she had said for a long moment, letting it exist between them instead of hurrying to soften it. Then I will make sure there is always room for all of you, he said finally. Not the parts that are convenient, all of it. She didn't answer right away. The city hummed beneath them, and she found she didn't need him to say anything else. It was the first promise anyone had made her in years that hadn't immediately asked for something back. 6 weeks before the Hana Tower opened, Taemin pushed back a client walkthrough for the third time, and Katherine finally said what she had been swallowing for a month. You do this. You disappear into deadlines the second something gets close to feeling real. I need you to tell me if that is what is happening right now, because I have already lived with a man who managed me instead of talking to me, and I will not do it twice. He didn't flinch, though it clearly cost him something not to. You're right. I reschedule things I'm not ready for and call it a scheduling conflict. I've done it my whole life, he exhaled slowly. I don't have a clean answer for you. I just have that. That's better than a clean answer, she said. Clean answers are usually rehearsed. So what happens now? Now I show up to Thursday's walkthrough, and we keep having this conversation instead of avoiding it. That's the whole ask. He showed up Thursday. He showed up after that more than he didn't. The tower opened 8 months after the pitch. Its lobby exactly what Katherine had promised, true instead of merely expensive. Her mother flew in 3 days early. They cooked together, filling the apartment with jollof and laughter. At the opening, her mother stood in front of the mural, a woman between two skylines, Lagos and Seoul, neither erasing the other, and wept quietly. Taemin found Katherine near the mural with 2 glasses of champagne. You never told me what it means, he said. It means I stopped waiting for someone to build me a place to belong, she said. I built it myself. Everything after that was just deciding who got to stand in it with me. And who gets to stand in it now? She turned to him. Something settled in her that she hadn't let herself trust in a long time. Ask me again in a year, she said, smiling. But I think you already know the answer. The rain fell over Seoul the same way it had the night Doyun stood dripping in her doorway with 4 rehearsed words. Katherine stood at the window of a new apartment smaller than the penthouse, entirely her own name on the lease, watching the lights blur through the water on the glass. Taemin's voice carried from the kitchen, asking if she wanted her coffee black or with sugar. Black, she called back. Always black now. She thought sometimes of the woman who had folded a dish towel with trembling composure and refused to let her husband see her break. She was proud of that woman. She had survived on that woman's calm for a long time. But this being fully seen, fully named, fully at home, in a life built entirely on her own terms, was something calm alone had never been able to give her. This was what came after surviving. This was what it felt like, finally, to simply live. If Katherine's story stayed with you, subscribe to Afro-Korean Folktales for the next story, and tell me in the comments what moment hit you hardest: the dish towel, the water glass, or the mural.